Trump's administration imposed on Costa Rica, Guatemala, and Panama be safe third countries to receive migrants deported from the United States. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, made a desperate swap proposal to Russia. And Palestinian resistance accuses U.S. President Donald Trump of promoting ethnic cleansing in the Gaza Strip and warns him that he will face a Palestinian, Arab, and Islamic response. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from TeleSUR Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. Trump's administration imposes on Costa Rica, Guatemala, and Panama be safe third countries to receive migrants deported from the United States. The tour of U.S. Secretary Marco Rubio forced the administration of the Central American nations to harness hundreds of migrants as their bargaining chips. Panama and Costa Rica are currently trying to transfer migrants willing to return to their country of origin. However, they have not even defined the operation plan, not following suit of Venezuela, a nation that has made a solid repatriation operation for over 7 years. In the meantime, hundreds of migrants are suffering from degrading treatment. The U.S. news agency AP reported that one of its journalists was prevented from entering the White House for continuing to use the name Gulf of Mexico. Julie Pace, the executive editor of AP, detailed a communique issued by the executive office of the president in which they were told that if they did not align their editorial standards with the executive order of President Trump renaming the Gulf, the agency would be denied access to the Oval Office. AP finds it alarming that they are being punished for this decision, calling it a violation of the First Amendment. Civil rights organizations point out that denying access to the press for disagreeing with news coverage is a practice of repressive government. In Mexico, the government continues to care for migrants after the cancellation of the CBP-1 program, which regulated entry into the United States. From a shelter in the capital, we have the following coverage.
Catherine arrived in Mexico with her 3 children. 2 of them are already attending school in the capital city, while she works in the kitchen of this care home that shelters 160 migrants.
My case is like that. We went from town to town, from bus to bus. Thank God we arrived here in Mexico City, and due to the restrictions of the neighboring country, the United States, we stayed here. Because I think that here in Mexico, they can also give me good opportunities for me and my children.
Photographs of some of the other families that have passed through the shelter are now part of this mural that reflects the gratitude and affection that accompanied them on their journey.
These photos are of people who made it to the United States to do their immigration regulation there. Some of them are from when they were here, when they were saying goodbye. And we also have other photos of when they arrived in the United States. And they contacted the team to send us photos to thank us for the attention we provide here.
Both adults and children receive, among other support, psychological care to heal the effects that may have been left by the long journeys and dangers during their journey.
There are children who experience the process as a journey, in which they tell you how they were in the jungle and got to know everything with emotion. But there are other children who had to see complicated situations and who see things with fear. There are also cultural promoters here with whom I also work.
In addition to encouraging them to draw, paint, and play in the art laboratory, they're encouraged to participate in productive projects, like this one in which plastic bottles, also known as PET bottles, are recycled, while they're taught about coexistence and family unity through the germination of seeds.
Because for all the events that are happening, the users are totally disunited. What we are doing is that with this small element of union, we are promoting care and inclusion.
These care homes will be expanded to house a total of 2,000 people, in addition to the 1,000 people receiving care from citizen organizations.
Unfortunately, the cuts in international funding announced by President Donald Trump are impacting these shelters, and that is why Mexico City is assuming the responsibility that corresponds to it.
Through multidisciplinary and, above all, focused efforts, this House of Attention to Human Mobility is especially dedicated to the issue of families. We have even had the opportunity to see how there are little ones with motor disabilities that are cared for. And there is also another similar house that is dedicated to the care of couples.
En la Cámara, Ricardo Martínez, Daniel Rosas, TeleSUR, Ciudad de México.
In Ecuador, the International Observer Mission denied that there are indications of fraud during the elections held the past Sunday, February 9th. On Tuesday, Novoa denounced irregularities in the vote counting and claimed to have evidence of a possible fraud that prevented him from winning with a higher number of votes. In this regard, members of the Electoral Observer Mission of the European Union and the Organization of American States denied that there had been fraud during the recent elections. Both missions emphasized that the elections took place in a transparent, peaceful manner with no major developments. The Mexican Secretary of Foreign Affairs calls on the Ecuadorian government to guarantee the life and protection of the former Ecuadorian Vice President Jorge Glass. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has taken note of the decision of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to extend the precautionary measures in favor of Glass. On the basis of international law, Mexico granted asylum to the former vice president, who was illegally and violently expelled from the diplomatic headquarters on April 5th, 2024, by order of President of Ecuador, Daniel Noboa. The regional body has asked the protection to protect the health and improve the conditions of detention of Glass. And now we have a short break coming up. Don't go away, we'll be right back with more information. Welcome back to From the South. Leslie Voltaire, president of the Haitian Interim Council, announced that he would bring to justice all those responsible for destabilizing the country. The acting president has asked Prime Minister Alex Didier Field to gather the information and evidence available against the persons sanctioned by the United States, Canada and the United Nations, all allegedly linked to various crimes that have contributed to undermining the peace of the nation. Voltaire assured that they will act decisively to bring to justice all those who have promoted actions against the stability of Haiti. We go to Cuba now, where the Federation of Cuban Women has expanded the legal, judicial and social framework of the protection of girls, adolescents and women on the island through the support for the National Response to Gender-Based Violence project. The initiative is sponsored by the United Nations Population Fund, and the Canadian Embassy responds to the national priority of ensuring a comprehensive and integrated response for the prevention and effectiveness response to gender-based violence. Osmaida Hernandez, member of the Federation Secretariat, points out that in Cuba no woman is helpless, but this project will guarantee attention to more than 30,000 women in Cuba's 40 municipalities, at the same time ensuring more effective protection, prevention and response to this type of violence.
This project presented is one of the actions that are being taken in our country to provide specific attention to the issue of violence, but its peculiarity lies in the project will get to municipalities. Therefore, it is paramount our population, our citizens, our women, our children and our teenagers keep posted about it, so we must disseminate the project, as we are one of the institutions or an instrument to safeguard their rights and guarantees.
In the early hours of Wednesday morning, the Cuban Institute of Music confirmed the death of national singer-songwriter Eduardo Sosa. On February 3rd, Sosa suffered a hemorrhagic stroke, and after several days of illness, he passed away on Wednesday, February 12th, at the age of 52. The news was confirmed by the Cuban Institute of Music, while underlining that the Cuban singer died after several days in a critical state due to the stroke. Sosa, known for his ability to fuse the trova tradition with contemporary elements, dedicated his life to the promotion of Cuban art and to the defense of its legacy. In other informations, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made a desperate proposal to swap with Russia the already Russian territories. President Zelensky is willing to swap some territories of the Kursk Russian province for others, which he granted his troops still control them. In response, the Russian government assures Zelensky is trying to hide the Ukrainian armed forces' failure in Kursk, including 30,000 Ukrainian fatal casualties. Moreover, the Kremlin demanded Ukraine must withdraw all its remaining troops from Russia. In all, the conflict had broken out due to Ukraine did not acknowledge either the 2014 referendum or the 2022 popular consultation, in which the citizens of Crimea, Sevastopol, the Popular Republics of Donetsk and Lugansk, Zaporozhye and Kherson provinces have expressed their will to be Russian citizens. The Russian government expressed its concern about the ongoing armed conflict in the African nation of Sudan. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov reaffirmed his readiness to mediate for a peaceful solution to the hostilities during a meeting with his Sudanese counterpart Ali Yusuf al-Sharif. He also described it as a good opportunity to discuss issues of common interest in addition to bilateral cooperation. On the other hand, Lavrov proposed to evaluate the situation in order to establish an agenda that promotes a peaceful solution and dialogue. Palestinian resistance accuses U.S. President Donald Trump of promoting ethnic cleansing in the Gaza Strip and warns him that he will face a Palestinian, Arab and Islamic response. In this way, Hamas responds to the White House plan, which they describe as racist, and point out that its only objective is to eliminate the Palestinian cause. President Trump has said that the Gazans will go to a third country and will return to a reconstructed Gaza administered by Washington. Hamas assures that these plans will clash with a solidly unified Palestinian, Arab and Islamic resistance. They also reaffirm their commitment to the ceasefire and recall that it is Israel that has violated the pact. On Tuesday, medical sources confirmed the death toll in the Gaza Strip rose to 48,222, the majority of whom are children and women. Health authorities denounced that despite a ceasefire, Israel continues its massacre against Gaza. The same sources added that the number of injured people surged to 111,674 since the start of the aggression back in October 2023. Authorities warned that the figures are much higher since many victims are still under the rubble and ambulance and civil defense crews cannot reach them due to the Israeli siege. Israel continues its aggression against the cities of Jenin and Tulkarem in the West Bank, breaching the ceasefire agreement. After more than 2 weeks of attacks, the Israeli occupation forces have assassinated at least 29 Palestinians, caused dozens of wounded, carried out illegal arrests, house demolitions, and hundreds of forced displacement. In this regard, Jenin's Mayor Mohammed Yarar denounced the economic damage that exceeds $2 billion during the last 3 years. The invading regime is also increasing restrictions on movement and access to basic services. Furthermore, Israeli troops are converting Palestinian homes into military barracks as part of Tel Aviv's expansionist plan. The Director General of the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza reported that at least 92 people have been killed in the strip since the ceasefire was signed. In the last few days, the Israeli regime intensified its attacks, killing dozens of people and wounding at least 822. In this regard, some of the people were killed when they approached the buffer zone of the Israeli troops, where they were shot at, and others from wounds inflicted during the genocide that lasted 15 months. It should be noted that a ceasefire was signed between Israel and Hamas on January 19th, in which it was agreed that the hostages held by Palestinian resistance movement Hamas would be released in exchange for the Palestinian held hostage in Israeli prisons, and it was also agreed that Israel would withdraw from Palestinian territory. In Lebanon, President Joseph Aoun rejected Wednesday any proposal that would lead to the displacement of Palestinians from their territory. The president reiterated Lebanon's unwavering support for the Beirut Arab Peace Initiative, which calls for the establishment of a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as the capital. The Lebanese head of state reaffirmed that the country's stance against any action that violates the rights of Palestinians as enshrined in the United Nations resolutions. Aoun also urged the European Union to exert pressure on Israel to meet the February 18th deadline for its withdrawal from southern Lebanon. We have a second short break coming up, but we'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Ethiopia, the 46th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union opens Wednesday, which is aimed at addressing the achievements of Africa. The session's agenda covers issues related to African collective action and the analysis of annual reports of the African Union and its various bodies. In addition, 6 commissioners will be elected to the AU Commission to oversee areas such as agriculture, economic development, trade, among others. The legal framework of Africa Free Trade Area will be finalized, and the status of the African disaster preparedness and response mechanisms will be adopted. On his keynote address, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, ECA, Clever Gattet, warned of how the transatlantic slave trade and colonial exploitation have affected the African peoples. Let's listen.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we cannot contest the fact that the transatlantic slave trade and colonial exploitation robbed Africa of its people, resources, and dignity, and left behind inequalities that persist in global financial systems, trade structures, and governance institutions till this day. The extraction of Africa's resources without corresponding development, the undervaluation of the African economies in global credit assessments, and the systemic barriers to trade and investment.
In Mali, the army reported Tuesday that they successfully intercepted a terrorist drone in Tessalit airport area near the border with Algeria. The General Staff of the Armed Forces carried out the operation at 9:40 a.m. local time while monitoring a military helicopter that was at the heliport. The drone will be subjected to in-depth research to better understand its operating system and thus find out its true origin. Hours before the capture of the drone, Malian troops neutralized several terrorists and captured a miner with a radio transmitter near the border with Mauritania. In France, the third edition of the Summit for Action on Artificial Intelligence ended on Tuesday in Paris. The final declaration expresses the need for artificial intelligence with a humane approach. The United States and the United Kingdom did not sign it. Over 100 countries took part in the summit. The gathering aimed to translate the debate on artificial intelligence into concrete actions. Almost 1,000 experts and world leaders attended this meeting to discuss the scenarios to ensure that artificial intelligence does not surpass human intelligence and potentially establish a form of domination. However, the United States, represented by its Vice President James D. Vance, presented artificial intelligence as a tool for domination, and it rejects excessive regulation. India Energy Week 2025 moves forward in New Delhi to discuss the transition to a sustainable future. The Energy Summit, which runs until February 14th, counts with the presence of at least 70,000 professionals in the sector and more than 700 global speakers who promote projects to boost the energy sector. Within the framework of this event, Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez held a meeting with India's Minister of Petroleum, Hardeep Singh, and other members of the executive with the purpose of strengthening cooperation ties and establishing strategic projects for social development between both countries. And with this information, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. I'm Alejandra Garcia for TeleSUR English. Thank you for watching.